A billionaire pretended to marry a poor girl for revenge, but he never imagined that the quiet woman he planned to destroy was hiding a secret that would one day break his pride and teach him what real love meant. Here's a soul-captivating cinematic hook crafted to keep viewers glued until the very end. He married her not for love. He married her for revenge. From the moment she stepped into his world, a world of glass floors, marble halls, and whispered expectations, everyone assumed she would falter. The elite would measure her dress, judge her accent, question her worth. This is Elena, he would say smoothly. She prefers simpler things. The pauses were sharp, the meaning unmistakable. Humiliation, subtle and precise, was meant to crush her spirit. He expected her to shrink, to stumble, to plead for approval, but he didn't know her. Because behind her quiet eyes, Elena was hiding a secret, a strength and intelligence he could never have anticipated. While he plotted revenge, she was learning, adapting, and preparing for a day that would change everything. The night he finally realized what he had created, it was too late. She wasn't the woman he could control. She was the woman who would redefine him and teach him the true meaning of love. Billionaire pretended to marry a poor girl for revenge, but he never imagined that the quiet woman he planned to destroy was hiding a secret that would one day break his pride and teach him what real love meant. Adrian Vale did not believe in love. He believed in strategy. At 32, he owned half of Manhattan's skyline through discreet holdings and controlled one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity empires in the country. His name moved markets. His silence terrified competitors. His signature could make or end fortunes. But 7 years ago, he had stood in a crowded ballroom as a different man, young, hopeful, in love. Richard Hart, media mogul, billionaire, kingmaker, had humiliated him publicly, accusing him of dating his daughter for money. Cameras flashed. Investors withdrew. Adrian's startup collapsed within months. He rebuilt from the ashes, harder, colder, smarter, and he never forgot the Hart name. Elena Hart, Richard's illegitimate daughter, unacknowledged, unprotected, poor. When Adrian discovered her existence through private investigators, something dark and strategic clicked into place. If he couldn't hurt Richard directly, he would wound the name quietly, marry the forgotten daughter, lift her high. Then destroy her publicly. Revenge does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers at the altar. The wedding was elegant but controlled, an outdoor ceremony overlooking the Lagos skyline. Sunlight bright and unforgiving. Adrian chose brightness deliberately. No shadows, no gloom, just clean daylight and calculated smiles. Elena stood beside him in a simple white gown she paid for herself. No designer drama, no glittering diamonds, just quiet beauty and soft confidence. She worked at a small legal aid office in Sorler, lived in a modest apartment, took public buses when her car broke down. She had never asked Adrian for money, never demanded luxury, never behaved like someone who had trapped a billionaire. She believed him when he said he loved her. That was the part that made his chest tighten unexpectedly as he slid the ring onto her finger. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. "Are you okay?" he whispered. She nodded, smiling through glassy eyes. "I just never thought someone like you would choose someone like me." The words pierced him more than he expected. "Someone like you, someone like me." If she only knew. Applause rose around them. Cameras flashed softly. Adrian leaned close to her ear, the words resting on his tongue like poison waiting to be released, but he swallowed them. "Not yet." Revenge is patient. But as Elena looked up at him, eyes filled with genuine hope, gratitude, trust, something unfamiliar moved inside his chest. For a fraction of a second, he wondered if he was about to destroy something he didn't fully understand. And hidden beneath Elena's calm joy was something else, a truth she carried alone, a secret she prayed he would never discover. Marriage did not change Adrian. It only gave him better access. The penthouse overlooking Victoria Island became Elena's new home. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, staff that spoke in whispers, everything curated, everything controlled. At first, she thought the distance in him was adjustment. He was busy, important, reserved. She told herself love sometimes grows slowly, but Adrian had already begun. Phase 1. Not cruelty. Isolation. He introduced her to his elite circle, investors, politicians, media executives, but always subtly diminished her. "This is Elena," he would say smoothly at charity galas. "She prefers simpler things. The pauses were deliberate. The tone, polished. People smiled politely, measured her dress, her accent, her background. Elena noticed the shift in air, but she kept her posture straight. She refused to shrink. Adrian watched carefully. He expected embarrassment, insecurity, breakdown. Instead, she adapted. She studied quietly at night, business articles, global trends, industry news. When she began asking intelligent questions at dinner tables, some executives looked impressed. That irritated him more than fear would have. Phase came weeks later. He withdrew her financial access, not entirely, just enough to make her feel dependent. Her charity donations were restructured. Her small legal aid program funding mysteriously delayed. Her personal debit limit lowered for security review. When she approached him about it, she did not accuse. She asked gently, "Did something happen with the accounts?" Adrian did not look up from his tablet. "I'm protecting our assets. You're not used to this level of financial management." It was a calculated sentence, not loud, not cruel, just diminishing. Elena swallowed the sting. "I understand," she replied quietly. But that night, alone in the guest room she had started sleeping in, because Adrian often worked late, she opened her laptop, and she began working again. Not because she needed money. But because she refused to become small. Meanwhile, Adrian moved into phase 3. He invited Richard Hart to a high-profile investment summit, strategically hosted by Adrian himself. The media covered it extensively. Adrian made sure Elena attended. He wanted Richard to see his forgotten daughter dressed in luxury, controlled by the man he once humiliated. Revenge, properly executed, required an audience. The summit ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and flashing cameras. Elena stood beside Adrian, elegant and composed. When Richard entered, their eyes met for the first time in years. Shock flickered across the older man's face. Elena's fingers tightened slightly around her clutch. Adrian leaned close, voice calm. "Smile," he murmured. "Tonight is important." He expected tears. He expected collapse. Instead, Elena walked forward and extended her hand to her father. "Good evening, Mr. Hart." Her voice was steady. Dignified. Controlled. Richard hesitated before shaking her hand. The cameras caught everything. The headlines the next morning were explosive. Billionaire Adrian Vale marries hidden heart daughter. Illegitimate heir steps into spotlight. Adrian felt satisfaction. The wound had been delivered. But that night, when they returned home, something unexpected happened. Elena did not cry. She did not confront him. She stood by the window overlooking the ocean lights and whispered softly, "You could have told me." Adrian froze. Her voice was not angry. It was hurt. He turned slowly. "Told you what? That you invited him for business." She faced him fully now. "You didn't have to surprise me like that." There was no accusation, only quiet disappointment. And for the first time, Adrian felt something unfamiliar creep into his carefully engineered plan. Guilt. He dismissed it. This was only the beginning. But as Elena walked past him toward the bedroom, one truth remained unseen. She was not as powerless as he believed. And the secret she carried was beginning to grow heavier. Adrian decided it was time to accelerate. Isolation had not broken her. Public exposure had not shattered her. So he moved to humiliation. Not obvious. Strategic. He announced a foundation merger. Elena's small legal aid initiative would now operate under the Vale Global Foundation. On paper, it looked generous. In reality, he stripped her of leadership. At the press conference, he stood at the podium, voice calm and authoritative. "While Elena's passion is admirable," he said smoothly, "running a large-scale foundation requires experience. My executive board will now oversee operations." Applause followed. Elena stood beside him, hands clasped, smile fixed. He expected tears. Instead, she nodded politely. But inside, something cracked. That foundation wasn't just a project. It was her identity. Her independence. Her proof that she was more than someone's forgotten daughter. When they returned home, the silence between them felt heavier than the ocean. You could have discussed it with me," she said quietly. Adrian loosened his tie. "It's business." "It was mine." The words slipped out before she could soften them. He turned slowly. "For how long?" he asked. "Until it collapsed. You were running a charity like a school club." The sentence was sharper than intended. And for the first time since their wedding, Elena's eyes filled. Not dramatically. Just enough to reveal the wound. "I married you," she whispered. "Not your board. The simplicity of it hit harder than anger. But Adrian held the line. He needed her to feel powerless. Because powerless people break, and broken people expose their fathers. That night, Elena did something unexpected. She left. Not dramatically. Not permanently. She drove herself, no security, to SURULERE. To the tiny legal aid office she had built from scratch. The staff stared in, surprised when she walked in wearing a silk blouse and heels too expensive for the cracked tiles beneath her feet. She removed the heels, rolled up her sleeves, and got back to work. Hours later, Adrian's security team informed him she was not at the penthouse. His jaw tightened. He didn't panic. He tracked out when he walked into the Surler office past midnight. He expected chaos. Instead, he found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by case files, helping a young single mother draft court documents. She looked up at him calmly. You came. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't apology. It was simple acknowledgement. The young mother stood awkwardly. Sir, your wife helped me avoid eviction. Today, Adrian glanced around. No cameras. No elite guests. No polished speeches. Just fluorescent lights and real problems. He looked at Elena again. She wasn't small. Here. She was powerful. Not because of money. Because people trusted her. For the first time, doubt flickered in his chest. If he destroyed her publicly, would he actually be destroying the wrong person? But then another thought followed. Richard would watch her fall. That was the point. Elena, Adrian said evenly. We're leaving. She stood slowly. I'll finish this document first. It was the first time she had calmly disobeyed him. And instead of anger he felt something else. Respect. That unsettled him more than rebellion would have. As they drove home, the city lights reflecting across the windshield, Elena spoke softly. You're trying to make me smaller, Adrian. He didn't respond. She continued. But I don't know why. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. She was closer to the truth than he expected, but not close enough. And what Adrian still didn't know was that Elena's legal aid work wasn't the only reason she kept returning there. Hidden inside one of those case files was a document with her name on it, a medical report, a date, and a truth that would change everything. Adrian did not sleep that night. Not because of Elena, because of himself. Her calm defiance at the legal office replayed in his mind. The way people looked at her, the way she commanded respect without money, without power. It unsettled him. Revenge was supposed to feel satisfying. Why did this feel complicated? The next morning, he made a decision. If she had secrets, he would find them. He had built an empire on information. No one around him existed without being fully understood. He instructed his private security director to quietly review Elena's recent movements and documents, standard marital asset protection. He called it. Within 48 hours, a report landed on his desk. Mostly ordinary. Office visits, community meetings, pro bono cases, but one recurring entry caught his attention. Lagos Central Oncology Clinic. Multiple visits. Unscheduled. Private. His jaw tightened. Why oncology? He didn't confront her. He investigated further. By evening, a second envelope arrived. This one more detailed. And inside it, a scanned medical report. Patient name: Elena. Heart valid diagnosis: stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Plan: pending. The air left his lungs. He read it again. And again. He checked the date. 3 weeks before their wedding. She had known. She had walked down that aisle, knowing. The room suddenly felt smaller. His revenge plan, the isolation, the humiliation, the pressure, replayed in his mind like a cruel montage. And she had carried this alone. No demands. No emotional manipulation. No desperate confessions. Just quiet strength. For the first time since this began, Adrian felt something far more dangerous than guilt, shame. That evening, Elena returned home later than usual. She looked tired. Not emotionally. Physically. A faint pallor beneath her makeup he had been too distracted to notice before. You're late, he said. But the edge was gone. Long day, she replied softly. He studied her face. Every detail suddenly different. Every silence heavier. He wanted to confront her. To demand explanation, but something stopped him. If she had hidden this, there was a reason. So instead, he asked carefully, are you well? She paused for half a second, then smiled gently. I'm fine. A lie, but not defensive. Protective. And suddenly he understood something chilling. She wasn't hiding weakness. She was hiding it from him. Not because she feared his reaction, but because she didn't want to burden him. The irony burned. He had married her to destroy her, and she had protected him from pain. Later that night, Elena locked herself in the bathroom. Adrian stood outside the door, listening. Water running. Soft coughing. Then silence. His chest tightened. This was not part of the plan. He had prepared for tears, breakdown, scandal. Not courage. Not sacrifice. He walked back to his study and stared at the original revenge file, the one labeled Heart Operation. It suddenly looked childish. Petty. Cruel. But his pride refused to surrender. Yet, he told himself, she hid this. She lied to. Maybe she married me for security. Maybe this is strategy. Yet deep down, another truth whispered. She could have used the diagnosis to bind him emotionally. She didn't. She could have postponed the wedding. She didn't. She could have asked for financial protection. She didn't. Instead, she carried it alone, across the hallway. Elena sat on the bathroom floor, holding the edge of the sink. The treatments would begin soon. She had delayed signing the consent forms. Not because she was afraid of dying, but because she was afraid of becoming a burden. She had finally found love. She did not want it mixed with pity. What she didn't know was that the man she was trying to protect was standing in his study, holding her medical report, and realizing he may have become the villain in a story he no longer understood. The gala was already scheduled. 3 months in planning. International press. Political leaders. Corporate giants. It was meant to be the night Adrian would complete Phase 4, public exposure. He had quietly arranged for financial documents linking Richard Hart's past offshore manipulations to surface during his keynote speech. Documents that would shake markets and humiliate the Hart name permanently. And Elena would be standing beside him when it happened. The symbolism was intentional. The forgotten daughter, the collapsing father, the victorious son-in-law, perfect revenge. Except now, he knew, and everything felt different. Elena stood before the mirror that evening, adjusting her gown. The soft champagne-colored silk hid the weight she had begun losing. Makeup covered the faint shadows beneath her eyes. Chemotherapy would begin next week. She had signed the consent forms that afternoon. Alone. She pressed a hand briefly against her chest, steadying herself. Tonight was important for Adrian. She would not ruin it. When she stepped into the living room, Adrian looked up. For a moment, he forgot about revenge, forgot about business, forgot about pride. She looked fragile. And strong at the same time. You look beautiful, he said quietly. The sincerity surprised them both. She smiled gently. Thank you. There was something softer in the air between them. Unspoken. Heavy. The ballroom glittered under massive crystal chandeliers. Cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. Investors watched. Richard Hart arrived late, confident as ever. Adrian studied him across the room. 7 years of anger stood between them. 7 years of rebuilding. Tonight, one speech could end it. Elena slipped her hand into Adrian's arm. You're tense, she whispered. He looked down at her. And suddenly imagined her collapsing in this room, under these lights, while he executed revenge. The image unsettled him. Are you tired? He asked quietly. She blinked in surprise. A little. Then we won't stay long. It was a small sentence, but it shifted something invisible between them. When Adrian took the stage, the room fell silent. This was the moment. His assistant stood ready backstage with the evidence files queued for projection. All he had to do was say the word. He began smoothly, thanking investors, praising partnerships. Then his gaze found Elena. She stood near the front, smiling supportively, trusting him, completely unaware that she was meant to be part of a public storm. His throat tightened. He looked at Richard. Then back at her. And for the first time in his adult life, Adrian hesitated. Revenge had fueled him for years. But what would this accomplish now? Richard would fall. Yes. But Elena would suffer. And she had already been fighting a battle he never saw. His voice shifted, unexpectedly. Tonight, Adrian continued, is not about exposing the past. His assistant froze backstage. Richard's expression changed slightly. Adrian stepped forward. It's about rebuilding futures. Murmurs rippled through the room. He abandoned the prepared script, abandoned the evidence, abandoned the plan. Instead, he announced a massive healthcare investment initiative, oncology research, funding across Lagos and beyond. Elena's head lifted. Sharply. Oncology. Her eyes locked onto his. He held her gaze as he spoke. This foundation, he said calmly, will prioritize patients who fight quietly. Silence fell. The meaning was subtle, but intentional. When the applause erupted, it wasn't for scandal. It was for generosity. Richard left early. Unexposed. Unharmed. Adrian had just sacrificed years of vengeance. Later, in the car, Elena looked at him carefully. You changed your speech. Yes. Why? He gripped the steering wheel, eyes forward. Because some battles aren't worth winning. She studied him. There was something in his voice she hadn't heard before. Conflict. And something dangerously close to care. But neither of them spoke further. Not yet. What Elena still didn't know was that Adrian had seen her diagnosis. And what Adrian still didn't understand was that her illness was only half of the secret she carried. Elena began chemotherapy quietly. No press. No announcements. No dramatic confessions. She told Adrian she was working remotely for a few weeks. He did not challenge it. Instead, he rearranged his entire executive calendar without explanation. Board members were confused, investors impatient. But Adrian Vale had stopped caring about optics. He cared about timing. Because he knew the treatment schedule before she did. He had memorized it. The first session was harder than Elena expected. The sterile scent of the clinic. The slow drip of medication. The cold metal chair. She sat alone, hands folded in her lap. She had chosen this. She would not burden him. But halfway through the session, when nausea hit harder than pride, she looked up and froze. Adrian stood near the doorway. No suit jacket. No press. Just him. Their eyes locked. You followed me, she whispered weakly. No, he said softly. I came with you. The difference broke something inside her. Tears slid down before she could stop them. I didn't want you to see me like this. He walked forward, kneeling beside her chair. I've already seen worse, he said quietly. The weight of those words hung heavy between them. She didn't know he meant himself. Weeks passed. The treatments weakened her physically, but emotionally she remained composed. Until one afternoon, Adrian returned home early. The penthouse was unusually quiet. He heard voices from the study. Elena's voice, and another male voice. Older. Familiar. Adrian froze. Richard heart. Inside his house, rage surged instinctively, but he forced himself to listen before entering. I told you not to come, Elena was saying firmly. You think I don't know what you're doing? Richard replied. Marrying him to protect me? Silence. Adrian's heart pounded. Protect him? I am not protecting you, Elena said quietly. You always do, Richard snapped. You took the blame before. You signed those documents. Adrian's blood ran cold. Signed what documents? You were drunk and desperate, Elena continued. The investors were going to destroy you. I signed because I was already invisible. Adrian stepped inside the room. Both turned sharply. The air thickened. What documents? Adrian asked slowly. Richard's face paled. Elena closed her eyes briefly. This was the secret she had buried. 7 years ago, the same scandal that destroyed Adrian's startup, forged financial authorizations had been submitted under Hart Industries. Adrian had assumed Richard orchestrated everything. But Elena's quiet voice shattered that certainty. I signed the emergency transfer authorizations, she said. Adrian stared at her. You, he whispered. Richard stepped forward defensively. She didn't understand the market impact. I understood. Elena interrupted. Her voice was steady now. I knew the transfers would destabilize smaller tech competitors. I didn't know your company would collapse specifically. I just wanted to save him. She looked at her father. Not with admiration. With resignation. He said if the company fell, people would lose jobs. I thought I was helping. Adrian's mind reeled. The humiliation, the collapse, the years of rebuilding. The revenge, all rooted in that moment, and she had carried it silently. I tried to tell you once, Elena said softly, eyes on Adrian, but you hated him so much. And then you loved me, and I didn't know how to separate the two. Loved me. The word struck deep. So you married me knowing this? Adrian asked. No, she whispered. I married you hoping you would never find out. Silence engulfed the room. Richard looked between them. Nervously. Adrian finally spoke. Leave. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Richard hesitated. Adrian's gaze hardened. Now, the older man left without another word. The door closed. Only Adrian and Elena remained. Two truths. Exposed. One illness. One past mistake. And a marriage. Built on lies from both sides. Elena's voice trembled slightly. For the first time. If you want revenge now, I won't stop you. She expected anger. She expected hatred. She expected the billionaire to return. Instead, Adrian sank slowly into the chair opposite her and covered his face with his hands. For the first time in years, he looked broken. The silence after Richard left felt suffocating. Elena stood in the middle of the study, pale but steady. Adrian sat motionless, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. 7 years of hatred had just collapsed, not because Richard was innocent, but because the narrative he built in his mind was incomplete. He had convinced himself he was a victim, then he rebuilt himself as a conqueror, then he married for revenge, and the person he chose to punish had been protecting her father from disgrace, and protecting Adrian from heartbreak. At the same time, he let out a slow breath. You signed those papers at 23, he said, quietly. Yes, you had no board, no advisors, no, you were trying to save him. Yes, his hands dropped, and I married you to destroy him. The truth landed heavily between them. Elena did not cry. She did not defend herself. She simply nodded. I know. The words stunned him. You know. I didn't at first, she said softly. But after the summit, after the foundation takeover, I started seeing it. Her voice trembled just slightly. You weren't trying to love me. You were trying to use me. He couldn't deny it. So he didn't. I was angry, he said. You still are. A small, painful smile crossed his face. Not at you. That was the first honest sentence he had spoken in months. Elena swayed slightly. Chemotherapy exhaustion catching up with her. Adrian stood instantly. Instinct overriding pride. He steadied her, and in that simple contact, something shifted permanently. He felt how light she had become. How fragile. And how strong she still tried to appear. I thought, she whispered, if I married you, maybe the damage would balance itself. Maybe I could fix something. You can't fix what I did, he said. Her eyes met his. What did you do? And finally he told her everything. The investigation, the stage humiliation. The financial restrictions, the planned public exposure, the hard operation file. He didn't soften it. He didn't excuse it. He let her see the ugliest version of him. When he finished, the room was quiet. Elena absorbed it slowly. Then she surprised him. I would have done the same, she said quietly. He stared at her. No, you wouldn't. For someone I loved, she replied. I signed documents that ruined your life because I loved my father. The honesty was brutal. Neither of them were innocent. They were both flawed, both reactive, both protective, both proud. Adrian exhaled slowly. For years, I believed revenge would give me peace, he said. But standing on that stage the other night, I realized destroying him wouldn't rebuild me. He looked at her fully now. And hurting you nearly destroyed what I was becoming. Her eyes filled again, but this time, not from pain. From understanding. So what happens now? She asked. He didn't hesitate. Now I fix what I can. The next morning, Adrian called his legal team, not to attack Richard. To clean the old financial trail. He quietly absorbed the liability Elena had signed under her name years ago. Reversed it legally, protected her permanently. No press. No announcement. Just correction. Then he did something even more unexpected. He walked into the oncology clinic, holding her hand. In daylight. In public. No disguises. No shame. Reporters noticed. Headlines shifted. From scandal speculation to admiration. Billionaire CEO funds oncology expansion, supports wife through treatment. Richard watched from a distance, for the first time, powerless. Not because Adrian destroyed him, but because Adrian rose above him. That night, Elena lay weak against the pillows. Adrian sat beside her. No phones. No business. Just silence. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. She turned her head toward him. Neither of us deserved each other at the beginning. He gave a small, broken laugh. But maybe, she continued softly, we deserve who we're becoming. And for the first time since their wedding, Adrian leaned down and kissed her, not out of strategy, not out of pride, but out of choice. Real choice. Chemotherapy was supposed to weaken her gradually. No one expected the sudden complication. It happened on a quiet Tuesday, Afternoon. Adrian was in a board meeting when his phone vibrated. Missed calls from the clinic. His stomach dropped. Before he even answered, Mr. Vale. The nurse's voice was urgent but controlled. Your wife is experiencing respiratory distress. We're stabilizing her, but you need to come now. The room blurred. He stood immediately. The board members watched as the billionaire, who never showed panic, walked out without explanation. For the first time in years, business did not matter. When he arrived, Elena was already in the emergency unit. Oxygen. Mask. Monitors. Machines. Too many machines. The sight shattered him. He had built empires, negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, survived public humiliation. But this made him feel helpless. A doctor approached. Her immune system is weaker than expected. The treatment is aggressive. We may need to pause or adjust. Pause. Adjust. The clinical language felt violent. Will she be okay? Adrian asked. The doctor hesitated just long enough to hurt. We're doing everything we can. He was allowed inside for a few minutes. Elena looked smaller against the hospital sheets when she saw him. Her eyes softened behind the oxygen mask. You didn't have to leave work, she whispered weakly. The absurdity of it almost broke him. I would burn every company I own, he said quietly, voice shaking for the first time. Before I miss this. Her fingers curled weakly around his. I didn't want you tied to this, she murmured. I tied myself to revenge, he replied. This is love. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. He leaned closer. You are not a burden, he said firmly. You are not punishment. You are not a mistake. I married. His voice lowered. You are my wife. And for the first time since treatment began, she let herself cry freely. Not from fear, from relief. That night, Adrian refused to leave the hospital. He removed his watch, turned off his phone, ignored the world. He sat beside her bed, counting every rise and fall of her chest. Around 3 a.m. She stirred. Adrian, she whispered. I'm here. If something happens, nothing will happen. She smiled faintly. You're still controlling outcomes. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to hers. If something happens, he said slowly, I will spend the rest of my life grateful I chose you instead of revenge. Her breathing steadied. The machines beeped rhythmically. And, in that sterile hospital room, Adrian understood something final. Love was not grand speeches. It was presence. It was staying. It was choosing someone when it would be easier not to. By morning, her vitals improved. The crisis stabilized. The treatment plan adjusted. When the doctor confirmed she would recover from the complication, Adrian stepped into the hallway and finally allowed himself to exhale. He didn't pray often, but he did that morning. Not for wealth. Not for victory. For time. Just time. Later, as sunlight streamed softly into her hospital room, Elena looked at him differently. Not as a powerful billionaire. Not as a wounded man seeking revenge, but as someone who had chosen her when it cost him control. You look terrible, she whispered weakly. He smiled faintly. I haven't slept. You should. I will. When you're home. She studied him for a long moment. Why are you still here? He didn't hesitate. Because I finally know what I almost lost. And this time, there was no strategy in his voice. Only truth. Elena was discharged 2 weeks later. Weaker. Thinner. But alive. And something about surviving that night had changed her. She no longer moved carefully around Adrian's emotions. She no longer tried to protect him from truth. They were done hiding. News of her hospitalization had leaked. Media outlets speculated wildly. Some blamed stress. Some hinted at marital instability. Some cruelly suggested the marriage had been strategic from the beginning. Adrian read every headline. This time, he did not ignore them. He scheduled a press conference. Not for business. For her. The hall was packed. Cameras ready. Analysts waiting for corporate updates. Instead, Adrian walked onto the stage holding Elena's hand. No dramatic music. No PR theatrics. Just quiet intention. He stood before the microphones. For years, he began calmly. I believed power meant winning. The room fell silent. I believed humiliation could balance humiliation. That revenge could repair pride. Elena looked up at him. Slightly. This was unscripted. He continued. I was wrong. Reporters exchanged glances. Adrian Vale did not admit wrong publicly. I married my wife carrying anger I never confronted. And in that process, I nearly became the very thing I once despised. He turned toward Elena briefly. She is stronger than anyone in this room. including me. Cameras flashed. But today, he added firmly, I am not here to expose anyone. I am here to close something. He announced 3 things. Full financial restitution to every small tech firm affected by the old heart transfer crisis, including rebuilding funds for those that collapsed. Permanent independence for Elena's legal foundation under her leadership. A joint oncology research and patient support program named after quiet fighters. The crowd erupted, not because it was scandalous, but because it was unexpected. He wasn't destroying Richard. He was repairing the damage. Mercy was louder than revenge. Across town, Richard Hart watched the broadcast alone. No scandal had destroyed him. No courtroom humiliation. Instead, Adrian had dismantled him quietly by choosing integrity. For the first time in his life, Richard felt small, not because he lost power, because he lost moral ground. That evening, Richard requested a private meeting. Adrian agreed. Elena insisted on attending. The meeting took place in Adrian's office. No press. No witnesses. Richard stood awkwardly. I owe you both. He began. Adrian raised a hand. You owe her. Silence. Richard turned to Elena. I was selfish, he said, voice unsteady. I let you carry consequences that were mine. Elena studied him. Years of abandonment sat between them. I don't need your apology, she said softly. I needed your accountability. Richard nodded slowly. It's yours. He signed over a controlling share of Hart Industries into a trust for employee stability, no longer under his sole authority. Not to Adrian. To Elena's oversight board. It wasn't surrender. It was responsibility. After he left, Elena sat quietly. Are you satisfied? Adrian asked. She looked at him gently. I never wanted him destroyed. I know. He hesitated. And you? She smiled faintly. I didn't marry you for revenge either. He stepped closer. I know that too. For the first time, the past no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a lesson. That night, standing on the balcony overlooking the Lagos skyline, Adrian spoke softly. I thought being powerful meant never losing. Elena leaned against him. What does it mean now? He wrapped his arm around her carefully. It means choosing who you become after you've been hurt. She rested her head against his chest. And who are you becoming? He kissed her hair gently. Your husband. Not a billionaire. Not a victim. Not a strategist. Just her husband. 1 year later, the balcony looked the same. The skyline still glittered over Lagos, but everything else had changed. Elena stood beneath the morning sun, hair shorter now, growing back slowly after chemotherapy, stronger, healthier, alive. The doctors called it remission. Adrian called it grace. Behind her, the living room buzzed softly with staff preparing for the anniversary gala. Not a corporate event this time, a celebration of the quiet fighters. Oncology initiative. Thousands of patients had received treatment funding. Dozens of small tech startups had been rebuilt through Adrian's restitution fund. Elena's legal foundation now operated independently, serving communities without interference. Revenge had once been his legacy plan. Restoration became his real one. Adrian stepped onto the balcony behind her. For a moment, he simply watched her. The woman he had once chosen as a weapon. The woman who almost died loving him. You're thinking too much again, she said without turning. He smiled faintly. I was remembering the wedding. She turned now. Which part? The part where I almost destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. She walked closer. You didn't destroy it. I tried. Yes, she said softly. But you stopped. And that was the difference. Downstairs, guests began arriving. Business leaders. Doctors. Families who had survived cancer because of the program. Young entrepreneurs whose startups had been revived. This wasn't power built on dominance. It was power built on correction. Before heading inside, Adrian took her hand. There's something I never told you, he said. She tilted her head slightly. The night of the gala, the night I abandoned the revenge speech, I thought I was sacrificing victory. And I realized I was choosing freedom. Her eyes softened. From Richard. He shook his head slowly. From myself. Silence lingered gently between them. Not heavy. Peaceful. Inside. Adrian stepped onto the stage again, but this time, there was no hidden agenda. He didn't speak about markets. Or rivals. Or pride. He spoke about lessons. I once believed being hurt justified hurting back, he began, but pain does not heal through destruction. It heals through decision. He reached for Elena's hand and pulled her gently beside him. She carried mistakes she made out of love. I carried anger I nurtured out of pride. Both nearly destroyed us. The room was silent. But forgiveness, he continued, is not weakness. It is discipline. Applause rose slowly, then strongly, not for wealth, for growth. Later that night, after the guests had left and the city quieted again, Elena rested her head against Adrian's shoulder. Do you regret marrying me? She asked playfully. He laughed softly. I regret why I married you. She smiled. And now? He looked at her the way he hadn't on their wedding day, not calculating, not guarded, certain. Now I would choose you without anger, without revenge, without history. He brushed his fingers gently along her jaw. I would choose you simply because you are you. Her eyes glistened. You know, she whispered. If you had exposed my father that night, I would have still stayed. He looked surprised. Why? Because I saw the hesitation in your eyes before you changed your speech. She smiled gently. I fell in love with the man who almost chose wrong, but didn't. And that was the truth. Love is not about never making mistakes. It's about who you decide to become after you do. As the lights of Lagos shimmered in the distance, Adrian held her closer. Once, he believed revenge would make him powerful. Instead, love made him better. And in the end, the billionaire who married for revenge became the man who chose mercy, not because he was defeated, but because he finally understood. Winning means nothing if you lose your heart.